unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome to this edition of In Depth, brought to you by Souls and Liberty. Obama is guilty of treason. Not quite, but getting there. Unofficially, that's true. Officially, well, there's a process to go through here. Our guest today is Rod Martin, who is, again, one of the guys, I say this about practically all of our guests, because we make sure that they're good and knowledgeable and all that and everything. And my mom had an expression, what that guy doesn't know isn't worth knowing. That describes Rod Martin. Hey, Rod, how are you?
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, love having you on. You got great stuff, great information, the whole bit. Just to begin the show here, we have a little clip of President Trump in the Oval Office yesterday talking specifically about the Tulsi Gabbard findings and the releases of the information and all that sort of thing. So it's pretty quick, less than a minute. Just want to play it real quick, and then we can go ahead and start talking. So, Adrian, go ahead and hit that.
Based on what I read, and I read pretty much what you read, it would be President Obama. He started it. And Biden was there with him, and Comey was there, and Clapper, the whole group was there. Brennan, they were all there in a room. If you look at those papers, they have them stone cold, and it was President Obama. It wasn't lots of people all over the place. It was them too. But the leader of the gang was President Obama, Barack Hussein Obama. Have you heard of him? And except for the fact that he gets shielded by the press for his entire life, that's the one look, he's guilty. It's not a question. I like to say, let's give it time. It's there. He's guilty. This was treason. This was every word you can think of. They tried to steal the election. They tried to obfuscate the election. They did things that nobody's ever even imagined, even in other countries.
Rod, I think one of the things that's kind of funny about this, we're just talking that, Trump just seems so much more composed now. I mean, he's obviously not on campaign trail saying all kinds of crazy stuff, and not crazy wrong, in his style. But he just seems very focused, very composed, and knows he's going to win this game. That's what it comes across as. There's a quiet, overriding confidence. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I wrote an article this morning called "Yes, There Will Be Arrests" at rodmartin.org, which everyone should check out and subscribe to, of course, rodmartin.org.
Absolutely.
And one of the points I make that's so essential is that this is not an outsider president anymore. This is a president who knows Washington better than almost anybody and knows all the players and knows where all the bodies are buried. He has come into this rested and ready, and it's hard to imagine how he could be rested considering he was busy being prosecuted in multiple states, nearly bankrupted, and shot at repeatedly. But hey, never mind. He's Donald Trump. He's kind of a force of nature, and he's come into this with a certainty, a sureness about him, and having thought through every possible detail of the next 4 years. He's not missing tricks, and he's not going to miss any on this.
Yeah, you got to say, I mean, that's not quite, but it's pretty darn close to a 180 from Trump 1.0.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, because he was an outsider, which was the benefit and also the curse. And this is what I was saying when I was busy supporting my friend Ted Cruz. Even if he keeps 100% of his word, he's not going to know what's coming at him. And that proved to be true. Mm-hmm. Well, he does now, and God help his enemies, because he won't.
Yeah, very true. I've said this a few times in various commentaries and things, but I think the 2020 election being stolen, I think that's all going to come out also with, actual proof. And there already is proof, but, it's just been ignored. But nonetheless, when that all, this whole Russiagate thing and Hillary Clinton and the Steele dossier and all of that, that was sort of like the first domino to fall, and all these other ones fell into place. So you go back and get that, and then all the rest of these things get revealed and revealed and revealed, and who knows what deals they work out with people to sing like canaries or whatever. So, but although I was despondent, as I sat on an anchor desk in Detroit covering 2020, and I actually sat there and took a picture of notes that I'd made where all the vote counting stopped in those 5 states. And I wrote down on there what Trump's lead was when that stopped. And then, of course, they all evaporated, and we know how that went. I mean, that 2020 election was stolen. I never had a doubt about that. But as all of this has matured, you know, the campaign in 2024 and Trump, and I'm thinking to myself, although it was a horrible experience, the COVID lockdowns, the economy, the $20 million for an egg, all that stuff was awful to live through. And everything that happened with the result of the mandates and the vaxes and all of that, the deprivation of just regular social time for children and people dying and, without relatives around them and, and all of that stuff. And that was just COVID. All the economic stuff, the foreign stuff, Afghanistan. I mean, the list is just endless. It was almost better that they stole that election in 2020, in my opinion, because it gave Trump an opportunity to go, whoa, holy crap, and we need to now plan a comeback. And the comeback, if we achieve that, which he obviously did, the results for these bastards will be devastating. Do you agree with my opinion of that?
Well, there's a reason that football games have halftime, and it's not just for the band, although I was a band kid, so, used to talk about.
Well, I went to Notre Dame, so the greatest halftime band show, Notre Dame, man, the Notre Dame Victory March.
Yeah, but you have halftime so the teams can regroup, reassess, and get ready for the second half. And it's important that they be able to do so. And that's exactly what Donald Trump got. He got a halftime that presidents don't normally get. Look, second-term presidencies are normally catastrophes. Yeah. And that's been true for just about every president that's had one. Even George Washington had a rough second term. And Donald Trump is having the exact opposite. Everything's going his way because they've meticulously plotted out every jot and tittle, every moment of every day, and they've been thinking about it for 4 solid years before they started. So, yes, that's 100% true. And I want to circle back to what you said about the 2020 election. Yes, it was stolen. Yes, we watched it in real time. No one even wants to go back to look at the video in Fulton County where they just absolutely lied to everybody in Fulton County and also nationwide that, there's been a water main break. We have to evacuate the building. Yeah. Except you've got 2 Democrat poll workers who don't evacuate the building, pull out suitcases of ballots and start running them through the machine on the security video as fast as they can. And nobody investigated it. And
well, the same thing, Rod, if I could interrupt you for a second. Remember, the same thing happened with the van pulling into it used to be called Cobo Center, Cobo Hall in Detroit. TCF is what it was at the time. Same thing. This van pulls in at, I believe it was 2:30 in the morning after we have to shut down the vote count. We're done, the counting. And then all of a sudden, at the dead of the night, tens of thousands of ballots come rolling in that white van. And there's, surveillance security video of that as well.
And it's fascinating how anytime we find ballots, they are only and always for the Democrat candidate, whether you're talking about the Al Franken race or the Al Gore race or this race, it only works one way. And the Democrats demand that we count every vote as if these are real votes until they win. Right. And then even if it's a 50 vote margin, all of a sudden, we have the final result. Yeah. It is always this way. We've seen it all our lifetime. It's gotten more and more blatant. And in this case, we now have information. Thank you, Kash Patel. Thank you, FBI. We actually now have information that the Chinese had mass manufactured fake mail-in ballots and fake voter IDs. We've got a bunch of them. We've got proof that this happened. And that puts a whole new spin on, for example, Dinesh D'Souza's documentary, which was much maligned. And of course, they were threatened with every manner of litigation, and they eventually mea culpa just to make it go away. But the truth is they told the truth. And all of that stuff you see in 2000 Mules was fueled in no small part by Chinese activity, which fits because Joe Biden was doing deals with China.
Yeah, the Chinese Communist Party loves Biden and it hates Trump. So of course they've got a dog in the fight.
Yes, and it makes the pandemic look a little different. Sure. I'm not saying that the Chinese necessarily initiated that as biological warfare. I'm just saying that there's a decent chance they initiated that as biological warfare because Donald Trump was breathing down their necks. Yeah. Donald Trump had to go. What he was doing was absolutely circumscribing China's ability to become a true superpower. And that's exactly what he's doing now that he's back in office in countless ways, including this new Japan trade deal and the trade deals with Philippines and with Indonesia. All of these are designed to deprive China of the hard currency necessary to be a real threat and keep them in boundaries that probably avert a war. And that is the last thing they wanted. So, okay, at the very least, we know they manufactured fake ballots and voter IDs, and that should be at least as big a scandal as Russia, which turned out to be completely false. And so all of these things get investigated, and that brings us to the crucial point. Kash Patel launches this grand conspiracy investigation. Okay, well, now we're talking about RICO. Now we're talking about things that are ongoing, at least into very recent moments, potentially
and legally, Rod, for the audience, explain why that is important. That this isn't, one of the reasons that, as you point out in your excellent, Substack report this morning, you've got everybody. Sidebar, you got to go read this. It's a fantastic summary, and we're really, really privileged to have Rod on to go into much more detail about all of this in person, here on the show today. But why is it important that they wanted to win 2020? Obviously, because that put 4 years in between all the Russiagate stuff, which was 4 years prior. So that's 8 years before, if Trump were to win again in 24, which he did. Why is it important that it's ongoing from a legal standpoint?
Well, it's twofold. It's twofold. As you say, they really wanted to win 2020. Well, why? Because a lot of this stuff is covered by the 5-year federal statute of limitations. And if they got control of the presidency at just that moment, they could run out the clock. Now, it might not have mattered because Trump kept appointing people like Sessions and Barr and Wray and Rosenstein and, all these people who were working against him. But they figured correctly that if he had a minute, he'd figure it out and he'd get rid of those people and replace them with others who would actually come after them, as is happening now. So that's one aspect of it. As far as the grand conspiracy case, if that is an ongoing thing and it continued on past 2020, into and past 2020, well, now you're well within the statute of limitations on most of these things. Potentially even Hillary Clinton's homebrew server all come back into play. Sure. And not only that, but it's about venue, because it is impossible that you could ever make these cases stick in the District of Columbia where they would normally be brought, because in D.C., Democrats absolutely walk, Republicans absolutely hang. There is no other outcome. But if this is an ongoing conspiracy, pieces of it took place, material parts of this conspiracy clearly took place in, for instance, Florida. And if you could get a trial on the grand conspiracy in Florida because there's enough nexus with the state to be able to make the case against some or even one, and so you bring the case there, now you've got a shot at a fair jury and a fair trial, and these people could really be in trouble.
Question that Trump keeps using the word treason. Well, two questions. Does all of this, I think with the common man, it does, in our minds, rise to the level of treason. You've got a former president, Obama, working in tandem with all sorts of people in federal government to first prevent him from getting elected, Trump, and then after the case, once he is elected, we're going to so hobble his presidency and actually try to push, and let's see if we can actually get him impeached. We need him out of there. Because, of course, who moves in if that had happened? Mike Pence. I mean, puppet, if there ever was one.
Yeah.
So, they could live with a Republican president like Pence. He's not going to do anything, and they know it. So, first of all, is it treason? Could treason charges be brought? And, of course, the reason I'm asking that is twofold. One, the federal law prescribes not just imprisonment, but also death for somebody found guilty of treason. I guess it's up to the judge or whoever would make that determination. But the second question is, as far as the trials, I mean, if there's a charge of treason and it's a trial, does that initiate military tribunals? Where would they happen? Would that happen at Gitmo? I mean, how does all of that play out?
No, these guys are going to get a federal court, a federal judge, a jury of their peers, every possible protection. They're not going to Gitmo. They are going to get every jot and tittle of due process because this has to be spotless. We've got to nail them. It's not enough to make people think maybe they did something. We have to actually put it beyond a reasonable doubt in not just the jury's mind, but most of the public's mind, that they really are guilty of really specific things, and specific people are guilty of those things. So no, my guess is the trial probably ends up somewhere in Florida, probably Palm Beach County, which is not a great jurisdiction for us either, but it's not hopeless like DC. And so will it be treason? Well, let's go back to what I was saying about China. That actually raises a very real prospect.
Yes, you bring in a foreign enemy, a foreign opponent.
Aid and comfort to a foreign enemy. Yeah. And I think you still have a problem making that case because technically we're not at war, and I think it's very likely that a federal court's going to find that whatever this is doesn't quite rise to the level of treason. But I would contend that it absolutely does morally. It potentially does constitutionally. It's the right word to be using. It's correct, but it may not be what they get convicted of. And that's okay, because it's just like if you accuse somebody of murder, you're including in that charge all of the lesser includeds, like manslaughter and so forth. So frequently they'll charge them with several things in the alternative, and they'll convict on what they can convict on. And it really doesn't matter that much what specific crime these people are convicted of. It matters that they be held account for what they did. And what they did was try to overthrow the government. So let me circle back to something you said a minute ago. You were talking about impeachment. You were talking about Mike Pence. Well, first of all, yes, they had no problem with Mike Pence. Sure. He's a completely beltway guy, and he's weak. And the truth is, we knew that when he was governor of Indiana and he got rolled on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. How do you screw that up in Indiana? That's absolutely inconceivable. Yeah. So this guy's a loser, and they knew it, and they knew that they could manipulate him, and he might even work with them. So as he did later with Fauci and Birx in 2020, as she details in her book. But regardless, what they wanted to do was actually impeach him. And you'll recall in the first half of 2020, the senior Republicans kept stating red lines that if Donald Trump crosses this, we're impeaching him.
Yep.
Okay, well, if you've got both parties impeaching him, you're actually going to remove him.
Right.
And he didn't end up, well, he ended up surviving that, but that was the aim. They wanted to create enough firestorm to get rid of him in the first 6 months. They didn't quite achieve that, so they hobbled his presidency. And they used the full power of government to do that, which is grossly unconstitutional and immoral. And then I think in 2020, they actually succeeded in their coup.
Yeah, that's a fantastic overview. Let me ask you, Rod, let me switch gears now to sort of the PR aspect of this for the Trump administration, which of course includes Attorney General Pam Bondi and Kash Patel at the FBI, and Dan Bongino is his backup, and all of that stuff. How, look, and it's important to say, the Democrats are the ones who opened the door to arresting a former United States president.
Oh, yeah.
So here we are. Spot all that.
Well, and Trump spoke to that in your clip.
Yep.
He had said that, it was so funny. It was a great applause line. You'd be in jail, in that October debate in 2016.
With Hillary. Yeah.
He didn't actually go after her. And he made that decision. And it was very clear he'd made that decision. Sure. That wasn't Sessions and Rosenstein. That was Donald Trump saying, that's just going too far. She's guilty as sin, but she's the wife of a former president. And in that same clip, you hear him say, but after everything they've done to me, right or wrong, heads got to roll. And that's exactly right. They have been very clear that you can not only arrest a president, you can not only perp walk a president, you can not only try him in multiple jurisdictions on bogus crimes that didn't even exist before they started. Oh no, you can also raid his home with the FBI given orders to shoot to kill if any resistance is offered by the butler or by Barron. Doesn't matter, in their discretion. That is obscene. And we've never had anything like that in American history. And we must not ever allow it again.
Yeah, and this is why all of this has to go through. As Trump said, I was the hunted, now I'm the hunter. And I actually think, given the team he's assembled around him, and I know there's discontent about Epstein and all that and everything. I get all that. But, these people and the people who are kind of more or less, out of the limelight, they're in the shadows of the limelight, who've been advising and, all of this and everybody. I mean, I can't imagine a more, complete team of people who are dedicated to the restoration of patriotism and America, and to wipe out these bastard communists off the frickin' face of the national face. What happens down the road in 20, 30, 40 years, well, they'll have to deal with that. We'll all be, hopefully standing in Jesus' presence. But in the meantime, these guys got to go.
At the very least, you must prosecute and convict some of the senior executive service guys who were, upper level bureaucrats who actually executed on these things. At the very least, you have to go to them. And I've been talking about this since Strzok and Page. If you don't actually make some of those heads roll, those people, or rather their successors, will never believe there are consequences, and they won't just do it again. They'll do many times worse again because they know there are no consequences. Donald Trump gets that. If you want to restore the republic, if you want any hope of elections ever mattering again, some of these people have to go to prison.
Yeah. And quite frankly, I would say, I don't know how it runs out legally about treason and all of that, but if it were possible, many of these people should face the death penalty for what they've done and not have 15 or 20 years to judges to go and appeal this and appeal that. You're guilty of treason, you mofo. Take him to the gallows.
But even if we don't get there, there's RICO. There's conspiracy to defraud the government of the United States. There are just so many things. And some of these things, were criminal on multiple levels, some of these people are going to face a lot of different charges. And again, there just has to be a consequence to it. This was an attempted coup. You can't let the coup plotters go. Maybe some of them get to go. Maybe we can't make the case against Obama. I don't see how, based on what Tulsi just declassified. Right. But, maybe you don't get this one, or maybe you don't get that one. You got to get some of them. You got to show there's consequences so that you deter future bad actors. They sit there and they say, whoa, if so-and-so went to prison, I probably will. And they don't do the thing they're ordered to do, that is, in fact, ultra vires under color of state law. Now, I've introduced that concept to make the point that we have this thing called sovereign immunity, just like we have presidential immunity. Yep. Those things are valid until they aren't. And that's certainly the case with presidential immunity. You don't get to act unlawfully under color of state law, which is to say, using the full force of government to do something which is otherwise criminal. That's just not allowed. And that is the basis of every single civil rights lawsuit against a government official since the 1960s. That is how we get the bad actors, through that exact theory. That's going to apply here. Some of these people did things that were technically within the scope of their job description, but actually unlawful. And you'd see the same thing in the military. If a private commits some kind of war crime, the fact that he was following orders has nothing to do with the outcome.
The whole Nuremberg.
You may not follow an unlawful order, and you certainly may not give one.
So here's a little series of questions, maybe just like a little yes or no, or maybe a little explanation, because all your stuff's always fantastic insights. So there's going to be arrests, which means there's going to be charges, which means there's going to be, all the court and the legal proceedings and all of that. What about, let me just sort of go through things. So you're arrested, you're charged, the prosecution makes its case, goes, files its charges. What about a rogue judge saying, this is all BS? What if there's a Boasberg who's like, this is crap, and just dismisses the case? Let's start there.
Well, that's why you have to get out of D.C. Because if you try this in D.C., that is exactly what will happen. Sure. These cases will just be dismissed with prejudice. That'll be it. So you've got to get them into some kind of reasonably fair territory where you can have a fair trial. And note what I'm not saying.
Who was the judge? Who was the female judge in the Mar-a-Lago stuff who said, "Get out of here, Jack Smith, with all your crap"? Who was that judge?
Oh, goodness. I'm blanking on her name now, but she's an example of what I'm talking about. Yeah. She was fair. She gave the Trump team all kinds of trouble, but she also gave Jack Smith all kinds of trouble. She was calling balls and strikes. She was doing a good job. We need a jury that will also do a good job. She's Palm Beach, isn't she? Isn't she Palm Beach County? I believe so, or near it, yes.
Near it.
In that district.
Okay.
Yes.
So you've got some judges in some places who would be, okay, this is all cool and all that. Now let's go to the jury. And something I point out a lot in my social media posts, particularly on my X account, is that these people have profited, like King Herod, on the bodies of tens of millions of murdered children. Yeah. So to me, that is the highest amount of evil you could possibly engage in. So anything under that, they wouldn't think twice. So let's say we get to a jury and they're picking all the jurors and all that and everything. I'm going to go right to where it would be. How do you know that, one or two of those jurors isn't like pulled aside and threatened by the, Team Obama evil, saying, if you vote like this, your whole family's going to be wiped out. We're going to destroy you later on. You're a little peon. Nobody knows or cares about anything about you. So, 6 months afterwards, after the trial, hey, if you find him guilty, you're dead. I don't see anything to stop him from doing that.
The bigger problem is whether they do it or not, there's a decent chance that at least some jurors are going to assume that they're going to. Everybody's seen the Clinton body count. Sure. Everybody knows how these people play. And again, there are never any consequences for them. So why not? Now, some of that is manufactured. We were talking about Fulton County and Detroit and, all these things in the election fraud. But what we didn't say is that each and every one of those was a Democrat district from top to bottom. The Democrats controlled the prosecutors, the clerks, the low-level workers, the janitors, the judges. I mean, every single thing. There was no way you were ever going to get a case against any of these people in those places. And that's where they targeted almost all of the fraud that I believe happened. Sure. So that's what we're trying to avoid here. D.C. is one of those places, and you've got to get to a place where you at least have a shot. Now, once you've done that, federal prosecutors do not bring cases they don't think they can win, and their batting average is shockingly high. Yeah. So my guess is Cash and Pam are working really hard to figure out exactly where they need to be and exactly how to get the case there. And they've probably been working on this since before Trump approached them about filling their current offices. And that's another thing I want to say to the Panicans. Guys, do you think Donald Trump didn't sit down with Pam Bondi before he hired her and say, look, this is what we're going to do. You're either on board or you're not. And right. I'm going to know because I remember Barr and Sessions. And, all of this has been plotted out.
Sure. I guess I wouldn't mind seeing a trial in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Well, yeah. I mean, if there's some nexus with Stillwater, that'd be okay. Or Tulsa or Little Rock or, well, maybe not Little Rock, but there are lots of parts of the country that would be good for us. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a place that has a legitimate nexus with the case, as the Southern District of Florida would. Sure. And also is a venue where we can get a fair hearing. Now, what comes of that? Who knows? Maybe you get in court and we can't make the case. But just the documents that Tulsi Gabbard declassified on Friday, I think demonstrate an overwhelming case against at least the core players, Obama and his immediate national security team. And I don't see any way that doesn't rope in Christopher Steele and Hillary Clinton and Perkins Cole and several people at the DNC. I don't see how you avoid it. They were all involved. But certainly Barack Obama and his national security team had come to the conclusion, the official formal conclusion, that Russia neither had the ability nor the intent to involve itself more than absolutely superficially in the U.S. election. And that point, having that information.
And that point, Rod, if I can interrupt you just for the audience's sake, that point of information is right there in writing, in documentation. It's not somebody said something to their barber's sister's cousin. It's right there. Pardon me. I'm so excited. I got to start sneezing. I'm allergic to all that evil.
And that's what's different. Up to here, we have had really solid but speculative cases. The Nunes memo is great, but it only goes so far. And the government has done everything it could under both Trump and Biden to obstruct any revelation of real truth. And suddenly we have hundreds of documents filled with real truth. Barack Obama, knowing that Russia didn't do anything meaningful, ordered an intelligence assessment that said they did. And ordered an intelligence assessment he knew to be false. And then they leaked it and made sure that this blew up in Trump's face before he even took office. It's absolutely a coup.
Do you think, let's go back to some of the kind of PR questions of this. So an arrest means an arrest. Should they revoke, they meaning Trump or whoever in the administration does this, should they revoke Obama's passport immediately?
I don't know that there's, honestly, maybe not. I mean, in Obama's case in particular, yeah, in theory, but in reality, if he fled, he'd be saying he's guilty. I mean, and there would be Democrats who would always say, well, he had to because Trump's a totalitarian dictator.
Oh, of
They're going
course
to
that's
say
what
that
it'll
no
be.
matter what.
I mean, they would make
but
him,
I think
if he fled, my suspicion is if he fled, yeah, an unreasonable mind will go, if you're innocent, why are you running? But given that entire machine that they have, they would turn him into a martyr. Oh, look, he's had to flee his home country, which of course it isn't. He's had to flee his home country, because of the dictator Trump chasing him. And, that's how that's going to spin. So you can forestall all of that, just freeze his passport.
Well, yes, you can. And that I don't think he's going to flee. I don't think any of these people really have anywhere to go. And the truth of the matter is, if the United States government really wants you, they're going to get you. So that doesn't really work for them. But I do think that if he fled, most people are not the kind of people who go burn Teslas and wave Mexican flags in the streets of LA and pelt ICE officers with rocks. Most Americans look at that and say, he was guilty. And he would be. And the obvious contrast is Donald Trump, who didn't flee the country, didn't do any of the things we're contemplating.
Went to court, got his mug
stood
shot.
up. He voluntarily surrendered each time. He voluntarily appeared for his mug shots. He voluntarily appeared in court over and over again, and nobody had to revoke a passport. Nobody had to do anything. And Obama's going to have to live up to that and just hope that they can threaten jurors.
Yeah, exactly. Is there so walk through, what do you think? Again, this is from sort of a PR thing, not necessarily a legal way to do it. What's the best way for the DOJ, Bondi, or whoever gets assigned the case to accomplish the arrest? Do they just quietly call his attorney and say, we're issuing a warrant for his arrest? Do you want him to just quietly surrender at, whatever law enforcement place or courthouse or whatever? And then he just goes and does that, and then you take his mug shot and you publish it. I mean, you do his fingerprints and, the regular booking thing when you're arrested, the whole booking procedure. Is that the best way to go about it? Or, should we get a perp walk? Roger Stone with CNN cameras there at 3 a.m, kicking his door down in Martha's Vineyard or Hawaii or whatever mansion he happens to be staying in. How do you think, from a PR perspective, is the best way to go about this for the Trump administration?
Well, first of all, I don't think the Trump administration is going to give too much consideration to the PR aspect of it. I think what they're trying to do is don't take me wrong there. Of course, they're thinking about PR, but are they going to be influenced by fear? Are they going to be influenced by, this would look bad? No. I mean, everything in the world has been done to Donald Trump. It's all on the table. So some of these guys, it's going to make more sense to an independent voter in the midterms for Barack Obama to have to turn himself in exactly the same way that Donald Trump did. And it's going to make more sense to that same voter in some cases for the FBI to show up at 6 a.m. with spotlights and helicopters and the whole shebang. And I think they will be very careful about how they arrange that, but I think mostly they're going to arrange that based on Donald Trump's assessment of just how wicked and guilty various people are. Some of these people deserve rougher treatment than others. And of course, Obama deserves the worst, except for the fact he is a former president. And even Joe Biden didn't do certain things to Donald Trump. So I'm sure they will follow that playbook to a T, in part so that they can say, we are doing exactly what they did. So here's kind of a philosophical question on, if
Obama's found guilty, like, how do you treat him in the booking and the arresting thing we just covered? And I agree. I mean, those are individual things, individual cases and individuals and different charges against different ones of them, whatever. But here's my concern. Obama and I are actually 2 weeks apart in age. He was born August 6th. I was born August 20th. If the trials go through, if everything happens, then he gets sentenced. Okay, what's to stop another auto pen or another whoever from just releasing him? Part of the reason, aside from sheer justice, because I think he's the biggest, dirtiest, filthiest slime bag leader that has ever entered the world, and that includes Adolf Hitler. I believe Barack Obama is worse than Adolf Hitler. Because of the far-reaching extent of everything that he's involved in. He's touched everything. If he gets released under something, and if he's sitting in prison, they're going to come after the guards, and he's still going to be kind of operating stuff like some of these mafioso chieftains operate even when they're in prison. That has to be cut off. I think, personally, that Barack Obama should be executed if he's found guilty on all of this. Now, I don't know if the charges would amount to that as a possibility of the outcome, the ruling, or what the sentencing would be. But that's where I stand on this. The man tried to destroy the country, and he destroyed as many people as he could, while he was also killing tens of millions of other children. I think he's one of the worst characters to ever step foot on the world stage. And if you leave him hanging around, if he's sitting there and he's in prison and all that stuff and all the money and the whole bit, they'll be planning like some sort of Nelson Mandela release, and that'll be a campaign talking point in the whole bit. I know probably some people are like, oh my gosh, with my opinion about that, but you know what? That's my opinion. React to that.
I think that, well, first of all, is the death penalty on the table? Well, only if you can make a treason case. The rest of this stuff doesn't get you there. And that's probably not the case that's going to stick. So it probably doesn't happen. As far as his ability to operate from prison, I think our experience with the mafia is exactly what we look to. There are ways to keep them from having much impact. I mean, they continue to have impact, but it's not really the point. I mean, the real issue here is consequences so future people don't do the same things. And second, some actual discrediting of the perpetrators. Barack Obama is a particularly annoying character in this regard. Yeah, this pretense that he had a scandal-free administration, is just constantly lauded in the media. And the truth is, no, this is the most scandalous administration in history. And let us not forget, this was all at the behest of Hillary Clinton.
Yes.
This is all coming back to her. And how much they're able to bring her into this is an open question. That isn't what was in the documents, just declassified. But I don't think it's a hard case to make.
Yeah, I mean, what are you saying? You're saying Russia was involved. Well, where did you think that from? Your entire case was built on Hillary's campaign of, hey, if you remember, I think it was that same October. Debate in 2016 where she was strutting around. It may have been that's when she was wearing white, when he said, you'd be in jail. Greatest debate lines of all time. But I think it was that same debate where she was strutting around about, 17 intel agencies say that, you're a Russian asset and all of that sort of thing. I mean, that's directly tied. I mean, there's no daylight between what her campaign was doing and what Obama, took on, after the election. I mean, there's exactly the same thing.
There was no Chinese wall. These people were working hand in glove.
Sure.
And that will be easy to prove. I don't think that's going to be complex. And, truth of the matter is she funded the dossier. The dossier was trash. The intelligence community knew that it was trash. So when 17 intelligence agencies claim that it's the opposite of trash, and they lie to a FISA judge to get surveillance of the Trump campaign, which is basically Watergate on steroids, all by itself. When they do all these things, they know that they're doing it dishonestly. They're using their apparent authority and their actual authority and the full faith and credit of the United States, if you want to put it that way,
sure,
to imprint somebody as a traitor, when in fact, that's what they were doing. So it's horrifying. It has to be dealt with. I really think that Donald Trump is more committed to dealing with this than just about anything. He needed to get some things out of the way first.
Yeah.
First, he had to get his team in place. Second, they had to have time to find the documents and do the declassifications and build a case, and they've been doing that. He also needed to get some domestic policy through, because it hobbles the deep state, and also you don't know what the reaction to this is going to be once you start really unleashing hell.
Yeah.
So he needed to get some things out of the way. Now the predicate is laid. Now the foundation is there. They're in trouble.
What did you think of, So yes or no, they should just say to Obama specifically, call his lawyer, say, here's the warrants, we're sending it over to you. He needs to present himself by noon tomorrow to whatever, and then do the regular booking procedure. Is that what you think will happen and or should happen as far as treating him?
Yeah, that's probably the right answer. I think they should mirror what the Biden team did so that they can say, you guys rewrote the rules. We're following your rules to a T. We're doing exactly what you did. And that should honestly include a dawn raid of whichever Obama mansion seems good and right. I would pick the one in D.C. and, helicopters and the whole shebang, because they did that at Mar-a-Lago. And that case was utterly bogus, not least because of the way that the archives had handled the exact same situation with Joe Biden, who did not have immunity, who had not been president at the time in question, and was storing random classified documents in his garage. I mean, it's just absurd. And this went on for years in Hillary's homebrew server and all these things. But somehow Donald Trump rates special attention. Well, these guys should probably rate some special attention too.
Yeah, it's going to be quite the scene, and I agree with that. I was actually saying to some friends, maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and particularly in the ramp up to the big beautiful bill, I said it seems like Trump is just he's got this whole bunch of stuff he's got to do, and he's got this really giant thing he has to do. So all these other things, he has to put the economy on track to doing its thing, which he's doing. That Japanese trade bill was fantastic yesterday, the announcement with all those details. Lock down the border, now start getting rid of people, now start trying to do election reform, now voter ID. I mean, one thing after another. He's sort of put all those wheels in motion, and those things are actually very important, even if there wasn't this prosecution of this coup that had never happened. And, those things are big enough on their own. But now they're all in motion. They've all got their own little, stage over there where things are playing out and moving in the correct direction. Now all of that almost appears as minor. You've got the biggest political crime committed within the United States, probably in the entire history of the country. And this
unquestionably ever, yes,
or ever, yeah. Seriously, I mean,
in the history of America, this is a third world coup. It's sophisticated, it's carefully couched in all the right terms, but it's a coup, just like Venezuela or some awful place.
So let me ask you a question also, if I can, and I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but everything you say is like so many like textures and layers and things to it. Like you say one thing and I have 1,000 questions. My old investigative reporter days. How how would or should the Justice Department treat any media people in all of this? Yes, they went along with it because it was whispered to them and all of that, but is that worth pursuing also? I know you run into the whole freedom of the press and free speech rights and First Amendment and all that and everything else with it, but it seems to me those water carriers, that those guys need to be sitting in a prison for 20 or 30 years as well.
Well, there are probably some people in the media who just on general principles ought to be flogged. You know, they're just terrible people. But as far as making a case against them, I think for the most part, that would be exceedingly difficult and probably counterproductive. The truth is, what they had in terms of contributors is your real target-rich environment. It's James Comey, it's Clapper, it's Brennan, it's every single one of the 51 intelligence officers who lied through their teeth, including, Anthony Blinken organized this, claiming that the FBI didn't already have the Hunter Biden laptop in 2019 and hadn't verified that it was Hunter's and that it was somehow Russian disinformation, which absolutely gave Biden an edge in the election. The polling after the election was very, very clear on that lots of Democrats would have flipped their vote. Democrats would have flipped their vote if they'd known the truth about the laptop. So again and again and again, you have people who are making a fortune on CNN and MSNBC and the other networks lying to bring these things to pass under color of state law, because they all had security clearances when they were doing it. That's what Trump did on his first day back in office. He revoked all their security clearances so they couldn't make money off of that anymore. But the point is, they were using their security clearances not by divulging classified information per se, but by giving the appearance of, we can't tell you why, but you need to trust us. Right. And of course, Shifty Schiff did the same thing. He absolutely lied to the cameras repeatedly, claiming that he had personally seen proof of Russian collusion with Trump, which didn't exist, and he was completely lying. He's using the power of government to bring about a result that is impermissible.
So is that a crime on his part? Is it a crime for him to sit on, the desk with Rachel Maddow or her split screen and say, I have seen it personally? Is that a crime that he can sit in prison for?
I think that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure that they're going to try to go that direction, because they really don't have to. Schiff has committed mortgage fraud, so he's going to go to prison for that.
It's the Al Capone treatment to tax evasion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, and you saw this with Tish James, who claimed on her mortgage application that her residence in Virginia was her primary residence. She is legally required to be a resident of the state of New York when she's signing this document. She's the Attorney General. She knows the import of her words.
Just on the side of this, I think this is part of, to go back to your excellent Substack that everybody should read, that you published this morning. That's the sort of thing that gives conservatives and patriots pause. Why the hell isn't there charges filed against, Tish James and Adam Schiff already? Why aren't they already in court? Why isn't she removed, from her position on leave while she's being charged criminally with something? Why is Adam Schiff still sitting in the Senate uncharged? What the hell takes so long with this? That's such an obvious open and shut case for both of them. Hell, she said her brother was her husband. Check the box.
Well, this is the problem of Trump time. We really think a lot of time has passed since January 20th, but in reality, very little has. It was February and March before some of the key people we're talking about were even confirmed by the Senate.
Sure.
And then you get Bongino after that, and they've got to start from zero. And, oh, by the way, you just saw what happened in New Jersey, where Alina Habba is the acting U.S. attorney.
Yeah.
And she runs out of time because the Senate hasn't gotten to her confirmation. And that's going to be a pain in the butt because the New Jersey senators have invoked a Senate privilege to keep her from being confirmed. I think John Thune will ignore them and go ahead with the vote. But the point is, you really don't have key personnel everywhere you need them, even now. And this was a crucial point in the first term that most people missed. The Democrats used every procedural trick in the book to prevent Trump's team from even getting a confirmation hearing. Correct. They invoked the 30-hour rule on every single nominee. And we did the math back at the time, and we were on track for Trump to get his basic team that you want confirmed in the first 60 days or so. We were on track to get all those people confirmed by sometime in 2027. That's in 2017. Yeah. It was just absurd. So the man doesn't have his full team in place. And Tish James, you're going to need the right U.S. attorney to bring that case. You're going to need the right U.S. attorney to bring the case against Schiff. I don't think those people are in place yet. I'm not 100% sure of that. But also, we just found out about those things, and now somebody actually has to build the case and get it ready to take to a grand jury.
Yeah, you got to get an indictment out of the grand jury in both cases. We've only got a couple minutes left, Rod. And as usual, thank you very much for spending your time with us and going over all of this stuff. It's always great to have you on the show. Do you take, again, a bit of a legal question, do you proceed with the case against Obama and everybody that was in the Oval Office, that meeting with him, Susan Rice, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, all the ones named there in the documents. Do you try them collectively so they're all sitting at the defense table once the trial would begin? Or are those each one of those individual cases?
They're probably individual cases, but that's going to be trial strategy, and that's going to depend on who's trying the case and their opinion. Like I said, it could be a special prosecutor. It could be a U.S. attorney who is tapped as a special prosecutor, but it could be somebody outside of government. It wouldn't shock me if Donald Trump picks Matt Gaetz as the special prosecutor in this case. And Matt is a friend of mine. He was my congressman for a good long while. And I can just tell you that that will be their worst nightmare, if so. But there are lots of good people to pick from, and Trump has had time to figure out who's who.
I think you better think in terms of, not you, but the Trump administration better think in terms of like witness protection, protective custody, security detachments and everything. I mean, you can easily imagine, that, Matt Gaetz all of a sudden gets in a mysterious car accident and dies.
Absolutely.
Or any of that stuff. That's who these people are. I mean, they're worse than the mafia because they've got more power than the mafia.
That's literally true. You're exactly right. In Matt's case, his brother-in-law is Palmer Luckey, so there will be drone strikes in retaliation. But, for most people, they're going to need all the protections that you would have in a RICO case against an organized crime family. Yeah. And anybody who has any illusions of that is not someone at this point whom Donald Trump would hire.
Correct. Yeah. I think it's very... It's almost like surreal here. I mean, you and I were both live. I helped cover the OJ trial and all that, and there was all of that stuff that went on for weeks and months, and then all the drama, of course, of the Bronco driving down the road, all of that business. Even that seemed kind of surreal, and it was only because OJ was, a former NFL player and NBC sports commentator. Hell, he used to stand on the sidelines on Notre Dame games when he was working for NBC. And he had all that celebrity stuff, and then, of course, the gruesomeness of the murders and everything. All of that kind of captivated the country and made everything, he had the Dream Team attorneys, and that's where the Kardashians came from, all of that stuff. Big, huge, giant thing. And it all seems so surreal. I can't imagine how surreal, ethereal something like this is going to become, because it's going to happen, as you said. There will be the arrests, there will be the trials, all that stuff. It's going to seem like living in like a fog.
Yeah, it's going to be a zoo. And the OJ trial is an excellent analogy. Absolutely captivated everybody. Absolutely, all day, wall to wall. We don't have the kind of television setup that we did back then. Everybody isn't watching the same 3 networks anymore. I get that. And the mainstream media is going to do everything they can to ignore this or to spin it in a way that is helpful to Obama's team. But the truth of the matter is, this is going to be impossible to ignore. And Donald Trump knows the limits of what he can achieve in a lame duck second term. He's the least lame duck in history, and yet that will attenuate over time. It'll face time decay like an options contract. Yeah. But at the end of the day, this stuff continues until and unless he's out of office and his successor loses. So there's no way for them to really escape this. This doesn't depend on Trump having, the legislature behind him or,
right. This is his Justice Department. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he has the right team there. He doesn't have enough of them yet, but they clearly think there's enough of them in place at this point and enough of the bad guys moved out that they can start beating these drums. They're not doing this idly. They're not going to beat these drums and not have consequences, because they know they will completely lose the confidence of their base. If they do that, I simply don't believe that it's possible that could happen here.
One final question, your thoughts. Should there be, I know we're out of time, but if this happens, because of the monumental nature of it happening, should Donald Trump give an address to the nation from the Oval Office?
Yes, I think so. And actually, he gave a great one in December of 2020 about the election theft. And that got just glossed over. Nobody really paid attention. But he's done this kind of thing before. And I think this time he'll have everybody's attention.
Absolutely. Rod Martin, thank you very, very much. How can people find you very quickly here? The clock's ticking.
Go to rodmartin.org and sign up for my X while you're there. The link to my X is in the top left-hand corner of rodmartin.org. We have almost 250,000 followers now on X, and you might be the 250,000th. So come today.
And if you are, you get a toaster oven.
Or something, yeah.
or something. And very quickly on that, just a little funny story just popped into my head about it. I became a 1 million miler, years ago. I'm actually a 2+ million miler now with a particular airline. And when I knew that when I landed one trip years and years ago in Iowa, Sioux City, that when that plane touched down, I had gotten over 1 million miles. I'm like, yeah, I'm a 1 million miler. Look at me. And I got off the plane. I went straight to the gate and said, hey, I just made my 1 million mile. You can look me up there in the whole pit. And I said, do I get something? And she was kind of stunned. She's a sweet young lady. And she said, and she reached under the desk and she said, here. And she gave me a pen, a used pen.
Yeah, that's about what I got, too.
This is what you get for like 1 million miles, really? Rod Martin, thanks very much for coming on, brother. Again, we will be in constant touch during all of this. This is OJ, that was nothing. This, I completely out of the galaxy as far as everything. I actually sort of think that once a trial begins, the entire country will come to a grinding halt and watch every single day of this until there is a conclusion to it. Indeed. Rod Martin, thanks very much for coming on, brother. Appreciate it. Again, everybody, if you like what you hear here on Souls and Liberty, on In Depth, this is the kind of level of guests you see that we have on. Smart, intelligent, gets everything, conversive, understands, all plugged in, all of that stuff. If you like that, please go to Souls and Liberty and check off that little box and become a donor. That's how we do this, how we're able to do it. Sign up for our newsletter, become involved with us, because we have our finger on the pulse of this like no other group out there. Thanks very much for coming on. Gary Michael Vore is coming to you from Houston, Texas. God love you.